Hello, I'm Jan Czerwiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express, and as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Now, this time around, we're looking at Germany, the land of beer, pretzels, and apparently a rising tide of pro-Russian sentiment. Because just when you thought Europe had learned its lessons from history, it seems part of Germany are ready to cozy up to Moscow once again. So let's set the stage. Elections are coming up in 3 eastern German states, Brandenburg, Saxony and Thuringia. And it's looking like they might roll out the welcome mat for some seriously Russia-friendly parties. So let's get to it and look at our latest report.
German elections in the eastern lands of Thuringia and Saxony are set to take place this Sunday. The ballot comes just a week after 3 people were stabbed to death in the western city of Solingen by a Syrian asylum seeker. The attack has shaken up Germany and stirred a sour debate about immigration, contributing to the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany rise in popularity. The party is listed as the biggest in Thuringia with around 30% support, while in Saxony it is running neck and neck for first place with the conservative CDU.
We want to end the failure of the state, the loss of control, and that can only be done through a sustainable change in migration and asylum policy. I can assure you that if we are in government, the borders will be closed and controlled.
It is highly unlikely that the AfD would grab the reins of power in either state, given other parties' refusal to collaborate with it to form a majority. Still, the upward curve in its popularity shows that the public is quick to forget the AfD's Russian trail. In April, Germany's weekly Der Spiegel reported that AfD's program dubbed the Manifest was authored by the Kremlin in the autumn of 2022. The number 1 AfD candidate of the time, Maximilian Krah, was accused of links with Russia and China. Also in April, the police arrested Krah's European Parliament assistant by the name of Jian Gao. Germany's Federal Prosecutor's Office charged him with espionage for Chinese intelligence and spying on Chinese dissidents in Germany. For his part, Petr Bystron, another AfD politician, has been accused of accepting Russian money. As reported by Der Spiegel based on an investigation by Czech secret services, both Krah and Bystron were embroiled in the Voice of Europe news website scandal. The Voice of Europe was established by Ukrainian oligarch Viktor Medvedchuk. The portal has been disseminating Russian propaganda in 16 languages and transferring money to far-right politicians in Europe. Krah and Bystron met with Medvedchuk in Kyiv in the autumn of 2021, when the oligarch remained in home arrest. It later turned out that Bystron was one of the recipients of the money within the Voice of Europe network.
And now we're zooming in on Germany to find out more about this story. So now, if you're scratching your head, wondering who exactly are these people, let me clue you in. The Alternative for Germany, or Alternative für Deutschland, is leading the charge, and they are posed to finish first in all 3 states. And there is also the newly formed Sarah Wagenknecht alliance on the left, adding fuel to the fire. This isn't just a bad flashback to the Cold War. It's like someone hit rewind on Germany's hard-won progress. If these elections go the way the polls suggest, the results could send shockwaves through Germany, and not in a good way. Imagine the centrist parties, which have shaped Germany since reunification, being shoved aside to make room for populists and extremists who have a bit too much nostalgia for the days when Moscow called the shots. It's like Germany's political establishment spent decades building a house of democracy only to have someone else show up with a wrecking ball and start swinging. This isn't just about internal politics either, it's personal for Putin himself. The Russian leader, who spent his early years as a KGB officer in Dresden, still has a soft spot for Germany, particularly the eastern part that he used to, let's say, monitor closely in his days. If these Moscow-friendly parties make a strong showing, Putin will likely be celebrating. After all, they are pushing narratives that are straight out of the Kremlin playbook. According to them, NATO is partly to blame for the war in Ukraine, and the West just isn't serious about peace. At this point, their messaging looks as if they are reading from a script that Putin himself might have written. Perhaps he has. And let's talk numbers. Polls suggest that these Russia-friendly parties could capture more than 50% of the vote across all three states. And while not all these parties are as openly pro-Putin as the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, they all share a common thread: a skepticism towards the West and a willingness to entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, Russia isn't the bad guy here. Now, the mainstream parties, the Social Democrats, the Greens, the Free Democrats, are looking at these polls like a deer in the headlights. Their support in these regions is tanking, and it's not hard to see why. For years, the political establishment has treated Eastern Germany like the West's slightly neglected cousin. Sure, they have thrown money at the region and the living standards have improved, but resentment over the West's dominance remains. Now, that resentment is fertile ground for populists who promise to stick it to the so-called elites. It is a stark reminder that the ghosts of the Cold War are far from exorcised. Russia's influence in Europe is alive and well, and it is finding fertile ground in places where old resentments still run deep. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Oleksiy Goncharenko, a Ukrainian MP from Odessa. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So it appears that Putin might actually have a certain obsession about Germany. He is trying clearly to interfere with elections there. I mean, many people would say, look, there is no hard evidence, but there is mounting evidence that some sort of Russian interference may be going on. Do you think that this can actually be attributed to Putin's past, to the fact that he was a KGB agent in Germany, and he still has a certain affinity for that country, its culture and its politics?
Yes, definitely. I think this personal story of Putin very important, and for him, and that's one of the reasons why Germany is so important for him. But also there is a absolutely pragmatical reason. Germany today is supporter number 2 of Ukraine after the United States of America. If to take military, financial support, humanitarian support, so Germany is number 2 in the world. So that's why Putin wants so desperately to stop this flow of support from Germany to Ukraine. Also, Germany is clearly the biggest economy of European Union, and which makes also Germany very important in Putin's plans of causing troubles to European Union, of dividing of Europe. Because when Europe is united, when the free world is united, Putin has nothing with which to fight this combined force. But if to divide the free world, divide Europe in pieces, then Putin has chances. So that's why it's so important for him. And clearly that now Germany is entering electoral cycle, with the elections on the level of federal lands now, and in 1 year, big national elections. And clearly Putin will do, and Russia will do everything they can in order to influence these elections and to push to German government authorities, the parliament, those who will tolerate Russia and whom they can influence.
So you've mentioned that Russia wants to exert influence on the political scene. Now, what are the differences between Western and Eastern Germany? It appears that Eastern Germany, due to its communist legacy, may unfortunately prove to be a fertile ground for these efforts, judging by the popularity of, for example, the Alternative für Deutschland party there.
Yes, and the Sarah Wagenknecht party. We also hear what they're saying, and they're saying what Putin wants to hear, that Germany should stop support to Ukraine, and so on. And definitely the elections in the Eastern Germany will be a challenge. From one thing we shouldn't forget, that in Germany, Eastern Germany, is not a big part of Germany. So what was controlled by Soviet Union before 1989, it's a smaller part. It's not a half of Germany. It's near, if I'm not mistaken, near 20% of electors, of the German citizens who have the right to vote. But still, Putin will do everything he can to use this part of Germany, because that will be important on the national level. The election result, which will happen in the nearest weeks in some eastern federal lands, that will be considered as a sign of a general mood in the country. So I see challenges here, and Russia definitely sees opportunities here.
Now, we often try to explain the mere fact that East Germany was under Russian influence during the Soviet era, and we're trying to use this as an explanation of why these parties are so popular. But this argument doesn't always work. I mean, look at countries like Ukraine. Ukraine used to be a part of the Soviet Union, but Ukraine knows very well that the future lies in the European Union in the West. Poland used to be a part of the Soviet bloc. Poland knows very well Russia cannot be trusted. So why do you think East Germany still maintains this sort of rather unusual situation, this unusual attitude towards Russia, even though it has been a part of the West for quite a few years now?
I think it's a good question. Probably people from Germany know better and they can say more. I'm not a German citizen. So they know definitely better than me. But I think there is one more reason. It's about economical development. The more developed are territories, the less Russian propaganda is effective there in the country. So Eastern Germany, as I know, is behind the Western Germany in the terms of economy, and that's something which Putin and Russia and other like malign actors can use. That's maybe one of the reasons. Another reason can be that Russian Secret Service, they have more possible people in these spots which were under their control for some time. And there are people who can be just Russian agents. And that's also possible that what was doing Putin in Germany. He wasn't developed in Germany. He was looking for agents, using them, controlling the people there. So that's something we should also keep in mind.
Of course, there are lessons from these countries' own past that extremism cannot be allowed to flourish. But of course, this should be at least immediately obvious to most people there. But let us actually focus on something slightly different. As we're approaching the end of our conversation, which of the false narratives being spread by far-right and far-left parties are you afraid the most, concerned about, we should probably say, that they may actually take foothold among the Western public? Would that be the war fatigue, that, you know, our party is going to bring around peace with Russia and Europe needs peace more than anything, and so on and so on? Or could it be perhaps the appeal to economic issues like we want clean energy, we want cheap energy, and we have a potential partner who can provide? I mean, again, not learning from history about the quality of that partner being Russia, but still. Which of these narratives, perhaps any other narratives, would you say are of the greatest risk at the current stage?
All of these narratives are a big problem. Currently, there are like open things, like when people are saying, "Oh, let us stop support Ukraine, let Russia do what they want." It clearly means that Russia will come and will knock at the doors of these countries. And like, don't forget that this part of Germany was occupied by Russia just 35 years ago. From historical perspective, 35 years is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And Putin wants to rebuild the whole empire, including control over at least part of Germany. So all those who are saying, who are singing these songs about, oh, let us ignore what's happening in Ukraine because it's just about Ukraine, they're just lying, because before Ukraine was Georgia, where Syria, part of Moldova is occupied, and so on. And after Ukraine, Putin will go ahead if he will be successful. But there are even more things like more complicated, not so clear. For example, I am very concerned about part of so-called ecological activists, who, especially in Germany, I'm not speaking about Green Party. They are Annalena Baerbock and her party. They are strong supporters of Ukraine. We are very thankful. But there are some groups who call themselves ecology activists, but in reality, what they are doing, the result of their activities for years was that Germany was becoming more and more dependent from Russian gas and Russian oil. And so they were fighting against energy sector in their own country, saying, oh, it is a problem for ecology. But a result of this was that they were becoming more dependent from Russian energy and very dirty, by the way, energy, because Russia is producing energy, gas, oil in a very dirty way, which is a threat for the whole planet in reality. So something like this we also should keep our eye on and should be aware of the real motives and real purposes of such things.
Also, because apart from producing energy in a dirty way, Russia is also conducting ecocide in Ukraine, apart from its other crimes. And again, any real environmental activist should actually be aware of that simple fact. Alexei Goncharenko was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Very much. Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern Newsflash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Kiev needs patriots, including those of the air defense variety. Ukraine's foreign minister has claimed that some of the US-made Patriot systems promised to Kiev by its partners have not yet been delivered.
With its incursion, Ukraine has fed the Russian bear's ire, triggering even fiercer missile attacks from Moscow. To maximize the protection of Ukraine's civilians and infrastructure, the country needs 25 Patriot systems. Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba has recently said, however, that some of the systems have not yet been received. He urged Kyiv's European Union partners to step up the delivery and raise the issue of greenlighting Ukraine's targeting of what he dubbed legitimate military targets within Russia, specifically airfields used to launch bomber attacks against Ukrainian forces and infrastructure. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell has repeatedly called for Ukraine's partners to lift restrictions on Ukraine striking targets inside Russia with Western-supplied weapons. But Hungary's foreign minister said Budapest did not want more weapons in Ukraine and did not want an escalation of the war.
A defiant Putin is scheduled to set foot on Mongolian soil next week, a territory where he risks arrest under an international criminal court warrant. Is this a fit of madness or an elaborate daring do? Well, let's take a look at our report.
The Kremlin has announced that Russian leader Vladimir Putin will visit Mongolia next week at the invitation of its president to commemorate the 1939 Soviet-Mongolian victory over Japan in the Battle of Khalkhin-Gol. Development of the Russian-Mongolian Comprehensive Strategic Partnership will be on the discussion table. The planned Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline could also be on the agenda, given that Mongolia did not include funding for pipeline construction in the country's 5-year economic plan. The trip will be Putin's first to a country that is legally bound to arrest and hand him over to the International Criminal Court. The organization issued a warrant last March for Putin's arrest over accusations that Moscow unlawfully deported Ukrainian children amid its ongoing invasion. Since Mongolia is one of the signatories of the Rome Statute, the country is technically obliged to comply with the court's demands. Mongolia, however, has maintained a neutral stance on the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, making it improbable that Ulaanbaatar would handcuff Putin. One example of good Russian-Mongolian relations is the joint military exercises dubbed Selenga 2024 that the countries held last week.
French wings are set to protect Serbia's airspace. During his visit to the Balkan country, President Emmanuel Macron has clinched the deal on selling French warplanes, something that he saw as a shift towards Europe. What was his Serbian counterpart's take on the deal? Well, here is the answer.
Shortly after Macron's arrival in Belgrade, Serbia signed a €2.7 billion contract to purchase 12 Rafale multi-purpose fighter jets from France's Dassault Aviation. The agreement will see Serbia receive 9 single-seat and 3 two-seat Rafale jets by 2029. Macron hailed the deal as historically significant, stressing that the European Union needed a strong and democratic Serbia. He saw the decision to purchase the fighter jets as a strategic and long-term choice in that direction. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić, however, was quick to make it crystal clear that the purchase did not imply that Serbia would alter its stance on joining EU sanctions imposed on Russia for its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The two countries also signed memorandums and agreements on cooperation in energy, defense, ecology, and culture on the sidelines of Macron's visit. Belgrade's EU integration path and cooperation in the field of artificial intelligence also featured in the discussion of both countries' presidents.
A poll published on Thursday showed that nearly 80% of Ukrainians consider all Russians responsible for Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Moreover, it showed over 60% of respondents felt the Russian population is encouraging Russia's leadership to continue the war against their country. Now, let's take a closer look at the survey.
10 years into Russia's war against Ukraine and over 2.5 years since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, around 76% Ukrainians agreed that all Russians are responsible for the aggression against Ukraine, about 20% disagreed, and close to 4% found it difficult to say with all certainty. A poll by the Ilko Kucherev Democratic Initiatives Foundation published on Thursday showed. The poll also asked whether the Russian population was encouraging Russia's leadership to continue the war against Ukraine. As many as 64.5% believed so, nearly 19% felt otherwise, and over 9% found it hard to say. This mirrors the results of a survey published in February by the Russian independent polling organization, the Laveda Center, which found that 77% of Russians support the full-scale war against Ukraine.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.